No one in Charleston ever forgot the night the old anatomy building burned, not for the flames, but for what the fire refused to destroy. When dawn broke on June 14, 1842, smoke still curled above the Charleston Medical Institute like a dying serpent, and the smell that rose from the rubble was not of wood or paper, but of something far older and human. The blaze had started near midnight, devouring the eastern wing of what had once been the pride of South Carolina's medical progress. By morning, the walls had fallen inward, exposing what no one was ever meant to see. Amid the wreckage, rescuers found bodies, not burnt corpses, but preserved human forms, seated in iron chairs along the basement walls, dozens of them, too many. Officials called them anatomical specimens, but these were no cadavers, their skin leathery yet intact, bones fixed as if time itself had stopped. Some still bore rope marks and faint carved initials. When one figure was moved, it disintegrated into brown dust that clung to the rescuers' hands. Within days, several men fell ill, claiming they heard muffled breathing beneath the floors. As the ruins cooled, investigators discovered a sealed subcellar lined with instruments engraved with initials, the most common being WL, belonging to Dr. William Lawton, a surgeon known for his lectures on human endurance. His final recorded topic, reanimation through preservation. 4 days later came the most disturbing find, a large iron door fused shut by heat. Inside sat a single preserved body dressed in a tattered governor's coat. The man was Governor Elias Thorne, who had vanished 2 years earlier during a yellow fever outbreak. His signet ring still gleamed on his finger, and his left hand was nailed to the arm of his chair with a rusted spike. The fire hadn't destroyed him. It had revealed him. Charleston's genteel image collapsed overnight. The church refused burial rites. Records vanished. Rumors spread. Whispers that Thorne had funded experiments on enslaved people, and worse, that he had offered himself as a final subject. The building was rebuilt and renamed the Hall of Medical Advancement, but workers spoke of hollow echoes, doors that closed on their own, and tapping sounds from beneath the floors. A custodian once described it as scalpel striking glass, before leaving and never returning. By the early 1900s, the tale had faded into Southern legend, until 1946, when restorers unearthed a scorched trunk beneath the foundation. Inside were glass jars, and a journal marked Elias Thorne. The final entry, dated the night of the fire, ended mid-sentence with one chilling line written in shaking ink. They promised I would not die. They did not promise I would rest. A century later, historian Dr. Evelyn Ward would reopen the Charleston Anatomy Room and uncover the truth that the fire had not erased. It had only preserved it. For more than a century, the Charleston Anatomy Room lay hidden beneath layers of plaster and silence. When Dr. Evelyn Ward, a historian of Southern medicine, gained access to the archives in 1946, she expected only ledgers and dust. Instead, she uncovered a story that seemed to pulse between the pages, a secret still alive. The journal of Governor Elias Thorne was small, bound in cracked leather, the color of dried blood. It had survived both fire and time, as if unwilling to be forgotten. The handwriting began firm and proud, but soon descended into chaos, letters trembling, words crossing into madness. The first entries spoke of ambition, the founding of the Charleston Medical Institute, the dream of making the South a beacon of science. Yet beneath his noble rhetoric, Evelyn sensed obsession, the governor's fear of death, and his belief that decay itself could be conquered. Thorne wrote of his work with Dr. William Lawton, whose initials were found engraved on the instruments beneath the ruins. Together, they sought to preserve life through induced stasis, blending embalming chemistry with electric current. The tone turned clinical, cold, until names appeared in the margins: Isaac, Ruth, Abram, Samuel. enslaved men and women purchased for instruction, each name followed by notes on response to procedure and endurance. These weren't cadavers. They were living subjects, sacrificed for immortality. Then came a chilling entry, dated May 1840. Subject number 7 ceased breathing, yet retained minimal pulse for 78 seconds. The governor will volunteer for testing upon confirmation. It wasn't metaphor. Thorne meant himself. The following pages unraveled, fragments of prayers, formulas, and hallucinations. The flesh remembers. The soul is conductive. His mind was deteriorating. The final entry before the fire described a demonstration using a serum of mercury, formaldehyde, and something he called black ichor. 3 subjects were to undergo the process before witnesses. The last surviving line read, "If I do not wake as man, let them seal me as proof." Evelyn closed the scorched book, the smell of smoke clinging to her hands. The 1842 fire, long believed accidental, now revealed itself as the collapse of an impossible experiment, one meant to defy death. On the final page, barely legible beneath ash, a single phrase remained. "I hear them in the walls. The pulse continues." That night, as Evelyn left the archives, she swore she heard it too, faint and steady beneath the ground. Not dead, not alive, simply waiting. The Charleston Medical Institute was quiet at night, its corridors long and hollow, echoing with the distant hum of pipes and the whisper of wind through broken shutters. To most, it was just another forgotten building from a cruel century, but to Dr. Evelyn Ward, it had become something far more dangerous, a place where the past was not buried, only waiting. 3 nights after she read the governor's journal, Evelyn returned. The faculty had refused her permission to excavate, so she came alone, slipping through the broken courtyard gate under a clouded moon. The air was thick with humidity and dust, and the scent of old chemicals lingered like a warning. Her flashlight cut through the dark, the beam trembling against flaking plaster and names carved faintly into the walls by students long dead. She followed the same hallway that had once led to the anatomy theater, the site of the 1842 fire. The double doors were still chained, sealed since the building's reconstruction, but rust had weakened the lock. It gave way after a single strike of her hammer, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the empty hall. Inside, the air was colder, unnaturally so. A faint mist hung near the floor. The room beyond looked like a frozen photograph of decay. Burnt beams half buried in ash, blackened walls, fragments of glass, and one surviving marble table, cracked through the center. She stepped carefully, her light glancing across what had once been the students' gallery, now nothing but rows of empty shadows. And then she saw it. The outline of a door hidden behind warped plaster. The faint outline of a cross-shaped iron handle matched exactly what Thorne's plans had described in his journal. Entry to the lower preservation chamber. Evelyn's pulse quickened. She pressed her hand to the surface. Cold, damp, solid stone. A faint vibration thrummed through it, like machinery running far beneath. She forced the door open. A gust of stale air poured out, thick with the smell of rust and something older, something that clung to her throat like oil. The staircase beneath was narrow, the walls lined with pipes that dripped black liquid. She descended slowly, each step sinking her deeper into silence until she reached the chamber. It was vast, circular, and perfectly preserved. The walls gleamed faintly with condensation. In the center stood 12 glass cylinders, human-sized, fogged from within. Copper tubes snaked into the ceiling. The hum she'd felt earlier grew louder here, rhythmic, mechanical, almost alive. Evelyn approached the nearest cylinder. Inside was the faint silhouette of a body. Its skin was the color of ash, its mouth slightly open as though caught mid-breath. The name etched into the brass plate below it read, Subject number 3, Isaac. The next one bore the name Ruth. Each had a number. Each had been a name she'd read in the governor's journal, but one cylinder stood apart. Larger, built of thicker glass, the brass plate darkened by age. Evelyn wiped away the dust and read, Subject 13, Governor E. Thorne. Inside, the body was almost pristine. His face was pale but uncorrupted, his eyes half open, the lips parted as if whispering. The governor's ring still gleamed on his finger. Beneath him, a coil of machinery pulsed faintly, feeding into the base of the container. A small gauge flickered, the needle rising and falling like a heartbeat. Evelyn's breath caught. The preservation was impossible. No body could remain untouched for a century. No machinery could still function after so long. And yet, when she leaned closer, she swore she saw his chest shift, a slow, shallow movement beneath the glass. Her flashlight flickered once, twice, then went dark. For a moment, the room plunged into blackness. And in that dark, she heard it. The same sound that had haunted her dreams since she'd opened the journal, a faint, wet tapping. From inside the glass, the beam snapped back to life, trembling in her hand. The governor's eyes were open now, fully, impossibly open, their irises clouded with a milky sheen that still reflected light. The hand that wore the ring twitched once against the glass. A hiss escaped the pipes above, followed by a rush of air, and the needle on the gauge began to rise. Evelyn stumbled backward, her light darting between the cylinders. The others were stirring too, faint movements like the shifting of something long dormant. The hum deepened, the rhythm synchronizing, steady and deliberate. Thud, pause, thud. A mechanical heart awakening after a century of silence. Panic gripped her. She turned toward the stairs, but the iron door at the top had swung shut. The hum grew louder, now joined by a whisper. Soft, indistinct, like air passing through dead lungs. Her flashlight beam caught the wall opposite the cylinders. A line of text carved into the stone, old and smeared with rust. They promised preservation. We remain preserved. Something cracked behind her, glass splintering. She turned just long enough to see a line running down the governor's cylinder, a thin fracture spreading like lightning. The fluid inside began to drain, hissing as it touched the floor. His head tilted forward, and for the briefest moment, she saw movement in his throat. A convulsive twitch, like the body struggling to breathe again. Evelyn bolted toward the stairs, pounding against the door until her fists bled. Behind her, another crack echoed, then another. The hum had become a roar, the air trembling with static and heat. And just before she forced the door open, she heard it. The faint, unmistakable sound of voices. Dozens of them, whispering the same words over and over, rising with the heartbeat of the machines. We remember. We remember. When she burst out into the night, the air outside was still. The building loomed behind her, its windows dark and lifeless. Yet in the silence, she could still hear the hum, faint, distant, but constant, beneath the ground. The following morning, the university announced that the subcellar had collapsed during unauthorized entry. Dr. Evelyn Ward's name was omitted from all official reports. The site was sealed once more. But those who walk past the old Charleston Institute at night swear they can feel a vibration under their feet. Slow, deliberate, like something mechanical still turning deep below. And sometimes, when the air is still enough, the wind carries a whisper through the cracked marble walls. They promised I would not die. They did not promise I would rest.